Happy Wednesday, everyone. This is the recording for September 4th. All right, using your notes from class yesterday, go ahead, pause the recording and answer these in your notes, please. Today's objective is similar to yesterday. We're going to be citing evidence again today, but our focus today is politics in the colonies. So when you think of politics, you can kind of think of government and the actions of people in response to government. So we're going to be citing evidence to explain the influence of politics as these colonies develop. We're going to be using historical research today because today is the day you're going to take information from the last 3 classes and finally answer this guiding question, what factors make up a community? So we're going to take all the different evidence that we have found and you are going to answer this question when all is said and done today. Okay, this will be the first time we are officially turning in a constructed response. I know some of you have done some extra credit ones, but this is going to be the first constructed response we turn in today. So just please remember, nobody expects you to be perfect, getting it wrong, and then getting it right, meaning that you don't have to get it perfect the first time. You can always go back and revise and keep working on it. So let's jump into politics and the colonies today. Quickly in your notes, I want you to think back to your world history class, think back to your civics class. Maybe you can even remember all the way back to 8th grade history. What do you remember about Enlightenment? Okay, in case you don't remember much, I am going to give you a brief introduction of basically what this Enlightenment period was all about. So in the 17th century, the scientific revolution had provided a new way to think about how problems could be solved in Europe. Rational thought and experimentation were used rather than looking to the authority of religion or ancient beliefs. By the 18th century, the ideas that individuals could use reason to solve society's problems became dominant. This movement, called Enlightenment, also referred to as the Age of Reason, lasted from the mid-1600s to the late 1700s. And then this picture has some of these main Enlightenment thinkers that you should know of. So this is going to be a movement that actually happens in Europe. It's not going to happen initially in America. It happens initially in Europe. And so what we're going to do first is kind of look at the chronological timeline, look at how these new ideas that started in Europe made their way to America. For our first activity today, we're just going to take a timeline, or I should say, we're going to create a timeline of enlightenment. So in your notes, you can create a chart like this, or if you want to just take a screenshot, you could take a screenshot. But basically, we're doing the date, and the date should always be in chronological order, meaning the oldest should go first. So this is oldest first, and then newest should be last, okay? The event, that's pretty self-explanatory. You just list whatever the event is or the person is in this column. And then finally, significance. Remember, whenever we're talking about significance, we're talking about why is this a big deal? So if the event is talking about John Locke, why is John Locke a big deal? If the event is talking about Montesquieu, why is Montesquieu a big deal? So you're going to create this timeline in your notes as we quickly read about enlightenment. I'll go ahead and read this paragraph for you, but feel free to pause this at any time, read it yourself, and then add your information to your timeline. So this next paragraph says, one of the most influential thinkers of enlightenment was John Locke. In Locke's 2 Treatises of Government in 1690, he outlined a theory of politics based on people's natural rights. He reasoned that while the government is supreme, it is still bound to natural laws that all people should have simply because they are human. He suggests these natural rights were life, liberty, and the ownership of property. Furthermore, Locke stated that citizens had an obligation to revolt against the government if it failed to protect their rights. John Locke and other English thinkers influenced many, including a group of French philosophers. So go ahead, pause this, and get your dates and topics and significance written down on your timeline. Here is our next paragraph. One of the French philosophies was Baron de Montesquieu. After staying in England from 1729 to 1731, Montesquieu came to respect the British political system. In 1748, he wrote The Spirit of Laws, where he suggested that the government would work best if it was elected by the people and had the right balance of power. He argued that the best government would be one in which power was divided between three groups of officials. Another famous French philosopher, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, also influenced Enlightenment thinking. In 1762, Rousseau wrote The Social Contract, in which he argued that all citizens should have a voice in major decisions. He believed all members of a community should protect the mutual welfare and do what is right for the whole. The Enlightenment movement spread throughout Europe and eventually North America. Go ahead, pause the recording and add to your timeline. All right, final paragraph to end or to add to our timeline. In colonial America, future leaders like Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and George Washington were coming to maturity during the peak of the Enlightenment era, which was the mid-18th century. Men like Benjamin Franklin corresponded with Enlightenment thinkers in Europe about politics and science. As these young colonists studied the works of Enlightenment, they began to exercise influence over colonial politics and society. Perhaps this influence is seen no greater than in the 1776 Declaration of Independence, where Jefferson famously wrote the words, "We all now know, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Go ahead, pause the recording, and finish adding dates, events, and their significance to your timeline, please. For our next activity, we're going to look at two other topics that show the influence and the role of politics in the colonies. The first is Bacon's Rebellion, and the second is the Zender Trial. This is the same chart that we used yesterday when we were looking at these topics on religion. So use the same chart today in your notes as you're writing it down and you're looking at the evidence. Tell me what the topic is. Give me a brief summary of the main things that are happening for that topic. And then you want to find my three strongest pieces of evidence for each of these topics. Starting first with Bacon's Rebellion, go ahead and pause the recording and read over this secondary source about Bacon's Rebellion. Here is a primary source written by Nathaniel Bacon himself, titled The Declaration of People. You can pause this and take out the strongest pieces of evidence. Okay, moving on to the Zender trial. Here is a secondary source. So this is somebody writing about what happened at the trial. Go ahead and pause and take down your notes. Here is a primary source. This is actually from the trial. This is his lawyer, Andrew Hamilton, speaking. Go ahead, pause the recording, read this over, and take down any evidence that you think is important. All right, we've made it to that question. What factors make a community? So this is a pretty general question, but you're going to answer this question based on what you learned about the colonies and how they developed and what influenced them. So use your class notes from the last 3 days and answer this question as a constructed response. So remember, for constructed responses, you should follow our class format. You can use the graphic organizer for help to make sure you get all the important information in there. Use evidence from class. So in all 3 days, you have had different pieces of evidence that you could use, and you are going to turn this into the online high school. The Dropbox for it is in 1.10. I forgot to give the code word earlier, so I'll give it now. It's politics. Just like we talked about today, the code word for today is politics. Politics. S, politics is your code word. Go ahead and take this time to go to the online high school, submit your exit ticket answer and your code word. You all have a great day. We have one more recording with new information in it, and then our review recording, and then you all are done with Unit 1. You're almost there. Keep up the good work.